Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the ClearCast podcast.
The big 2-0.
Big 2-0. This, as always, is the Real Estate FinTech podcast. I am Jeff Allen, and I am joined, as always, by my colleague and friend, Kenon Chen. Kenon, how are you?
Doing great, Jeff. I like that. 20 episodes on our 20-year anniversary as well as a company.
Not yours and mine's 20-year anniversary of friendship, the company's, Clear Capital's 20-year anniversary of existence.
You're right. It feels like much longer than 20 years.
It's actually hard to believe. I joined Clear Capital I guess 4 years ago.
Wow.
I feel like I've known you a lot longer than that. It's only 4 years we've been buddies.
I know. That is surprising to me too, but we're gonna have to keep at it.
I know. Well, in that spirit, let's keep at this podcast episode.
Yes.
We have a very exciting episode 20. We're going to be joined later on by Moiz Malik, who's the CEO of a cool company out of New York called Nooklyn, talking about what they're working on. Before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about a pretty cool new conference that has popped up in the prop tech space that you, Kenon Chen, just got back from attending.
I did. I've been doing the U.S. tour here since September. I think I've been going to a different event every week since first week of September. But last week was a bit different. The Blueprint Conference, which is put on by the same organizers as InsurTech. And I think the PropMoto covered it, and their leadoff quote is I think the best way to summarize it. They said, "I spent 3 days in Las Vegas with 700 prop tech founders and VCs who are euphoric about the real estate tech boom." And that word euphoric, like that's a great way to describe it, because it was like a bunch of, early stage companies that were super excited about what they were doing, and they hadn't hit that wall that we experience more on the mortgage side of like all the compliance reasons why you can't do that. So they hadn't heard no yet. So it ended up being super inspiring.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the types of companies that are at the Blueprint Conference, this is the inaugural version, so hopefully any more to come, are your kind of venture capital funded startups, prop tech companies, people who really have more of a tech focus and a disruptive focus. You think these people are euphoric now, but they'll be less euphoric later because they're going to run into and compliance, or do you feel like there's real momentum that these companies can do things differently? What's your vibe?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of discussion around, what's true innovation, right? That's going to be disruptive or take hold versus, buzz. I noticed that there was a super, local focus. A lot of companies were solving particular problems for a city, like New York, and we'll hear from Moiz later on some of the specific challenges around New York. Especially for leasing, and then there's a lot of focus on commercial real estate. I mean, not just in the single family rental space, but all the way up to commercial office buildings, dealing with the new sort of trends around hybrid work and how to manage office space effectively, how to use the Internet of Things, to understand what's going on at different facilities. And then, quite a bit of innovation around rentals, and with some of the changes in even like California, some of the zoning changes that allowing for more, multifamily, construction in what has been traditionally single family areas. It seems like that's the right the right focus for capturing, what's next in the built world. So yeah, it was fun.
Awesome.
And then
Well,
Ludacris was there. So
whoa, Luda?
Luda, he laid it down there at the end. So that, if you
So
didn't
we're
like everything I just said, Ludacris.
ah okay. Ludacris. I love
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love everything that you said, but I also
yeah.
particularly love Ludacris. So this sounds like it was a cool, unique conference, but it shares similarities to other big, stodgy mortgage conferences where you have to have like a musical guest that closes out, with some like 90s hits for all the old people.
Yeah, except, no one was wearing suits though,
Okay.
so it was,
Yeah,
yeah, it was pretty hip.
it's pretty hip. I suppose
Pretty hip.
Ludacris was more of a 2000s era than he was a 90s era.
All
So
right, dude, early 2000s, that's still like 20 years ago. That's
no,
crazy.
no, it's not.
Decades ago.
Don't do not remind me, please, if you wouldn't mind. Well, cool. Yeah, glad to hear it was such a successful conference and something we're going to have on our calendars here at Clear Capital for years going forward.
For sure.
What is your appetite for a joke? Hungry? Not hungry?
Well, I actually ate lunch today,
Okay.
so I'm actually pretty feeling pretty full. But
Okay.
I have a joke compartment. I
Okay.
got a little bit of space for that. So let's see what you got.
You have like a third stomach, like a cow, where you can fit a joke. Okay. Well, from my lips to your third stomach, this is an original joke. And I have to say that this may be the stupidest one that I've ever written, and I'm actually kind of embarrassed to be saying it. So
I'm not sure if
please
that
keep
sets
that
the
in mind.
bar. Does that set the bar really high or really low?
It's dealer's choice, whatever you think.
All right.
Okay, so there's this real estate agent, right? His name is John Pretz, and he's got this absolutely insane listing that he's trying to sell. And it is truly, truly weird. First, the ceilings on the entire property, every floor, are 5 feet high. The whole house, only 5 feet high. Insane. No idea why. Maybe dwarves built it back in the day. Hard to say. It's a tough one. You have to crouch just to like walk in the property.
Was this in Finding John Malkovich?
Excellent movie reference. That was a great movie. But no, that was not part of that film. Next, the other weird thing, the seller has a bunch of dogs, like 10 little tiny yippy dogs. And the yard is constantly covered in dog poop as a result. Like the seller never cleans it up. These 10 dogs are just constantly dropping little craps everywhere. It's disgusting. So we've got the 5 foot ceilings and we've got the dog poop all over the yard. You can see why this is a tough one for John Pretz to sell. Yep. But then one day, bam, a buyer calls up and goes, I want to buy it. And guess what? He's not even going to lowball it. He's going to pay full price. And Pretz is like, hey, that is awesome news, but I do have to ask. This house is super weird. Why do you want to buy it? And the buyer's like, well, that's easy for me to explain. I'm planning on starting a German restaurant in it. I'm a huge fan of German food, and I finally want to open up my dream spot to serve German food to the masses. So this place is perfect for me. And Pretz is like, huh? I'm confused.
As am I.
Why is this house with 5 foot ceilings and dog poop everywhere perfect for your German restaurant? And the buyer's like, well, think about it. You got a sour crouch to get around. There's schnitzel everywhere. And the deal is a John Pretz sell. It's a worst case scenario. Do you get it?
Why? Why?
All right, so let me little behind the joke here. VH1 behind the joke.
Yeah.
All I had to work with was this idea of worst case scenario, and worst would be spelled WURST, because I thought, hey, that could be something. But I've been working on this joke for a long time. Finally, last night, over a couple glasses of wine, my wife and my friends, the Ripplingers, workshopped with me other German food puns, and we decided to turn it into like a fourplex joke all around different German foods.
You didn't even bring in the dachshund named Wiener Schnitzel.
Oh, I could have done that. Missed opportunity. I'm truly embarrassed by this joke, and I don't think it's very good, and I'm sorry that I burdened you with it.
It's all right. I've got a few hours to get over it before I go to bed.
Okay. Okay. Done deal. Sorry, that one was truly abominable. Okay, we are incredibly excited to be joined today by Moiz Malik from Nooklyn. Moiz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Moiz is the CEO of Nooklyn. And Nooklyn is an interesting company. They are how people find and share apartments. Since 2011, Nooklyn has helped over 55,000 New Yorkers, that's a lot, find their apartment and processed over 85 million in rental payments. So not just a listing site, but there's kind of this whole workflow component to it as well. So Moiz, just to get us started, can you talk us a little bit through how Nooklyn works? What's unique about Nooklyn and what you guys do? What's a customer experience like for a Nooklyn customer?
Sure. So the unique part of Nooklyn is that we go end to end, in the sense that, you know, if you think about most of our competitors, say it's, you know, Street Easy, for example, all they do is match you up with an agent, and then it goes off of platform. And then there's the other side of it, which there are like On-Site and Appfolio, which are companies that help people apply, but you can't find an apartment through them. And so we've tried to combine the two, and doing that makes it so that, you know, our listings are more accurate, because the listings are taken down immediately as they rent. And because we have the workflow through our software, those tend to be the biggest pains when someone's moving, is, you know, where do I write this like certified check to, and all of that. And so we've been able to take all of those annoying parts of renting an apartment and just, you know, basically build them into software.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your website specifically says making renting easy and safe. The safe part was interesting. What about your process specifically highlights safety where others might not?
Sure. So we started, you know, a long time ago. It's like our niche was the roommates marketplace. And at that time, it's in 2012, where like the majority of, you know, finding apartments was through Craigslist, like really Street Easy and Zillow were not that big at that time, at least in New York City. And so if you ask, you know, any woman or any person like LGBT or any that sort, like if, you know, what their experiences were like, you know, using Craigslist, half the messages are things like, I want to touch your feet at night, you know, you can stay if you, just truly awful messages that, you know, when we think about the story of the customer, you know, 70% or so of our customer are women. And, you know, it's this story of this young woman who's starting her career, just graduated college. And the first thing that she gets, you know, as a message is, you know, basically tying her worth to her body or something like that. And so what we've done with Nooklyn is we built integrations into different ID verification platforms to ensure that people who go in to our roommate network are a real person. We've built tools to find out like if there's harassment going on the platform. So we have kind of like certain terms that, you know, trigger alerts like Sweetie or all sorts of things. It's so we built a lot of tools to ensure that people can't upload explicit messages. There's all sorts of things that we've tried to build to ensure that everyone feels comfortable using our platform. And I mean, overall, it's worked out great.
No, that's super cool. Just the identity, verification. I can see how that would have, a huge impact. On both sides, right? Both sides
Right.
of the transaction. New York itself is a pretty unique area. I mean, I hear a lot of folks say that the rental market in New York is unlike any other city in the country. Is the idea that if you solve it there, or if you make this process better there, that can be scaled to the rest of the country, or are you going to have to take a different approach in other cities?
I think that like the software tools, like the process of leasing is the same, right? So if you think about what leasing is, it's this two-sided transaction. You have the renter and the owner on the other side. And what they're trying to do in that process is build trust with each other. So the renter wants to know that that owner has a safe building, there's no mold, all of that stuff. They're going to be, doing good repairs, all of that stuff. And then the owner wants to make sure that someone's going to pay rent on time, not burn their building down, all of that. And so the software, the communication layer of applying and paying and all of that stuff is the same. The only difference from market to market might be that New York asks more questions than any other market would, but so it's just like a toned down version outside of New York City. But just to put out there, like our original plan was never to like have much of like a national business. It's our ambitions have scaled with the business. Like, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked we've gotten to this point as a business. Like all of us who were here early was just a way to let's start a business to, we didn't know about the startup culture, all of that stuff. So for us, it was just how do we make a livelihood for ourselves.
Well, what's kind of driven that change from the original vision of New York to looking outside?
I think, at its core, it's that like if you go to like Seattle, like the process literally is that like you go through on Craigslist, or you go through on like riding around the neighborhoods and like look at signs. Like that really still is the process. Like my cousin was looking at apartments in Poughkeepsie, and basically he literally just had to drive around finding signs until he was able to do it. Was able to find an apartment. And it's super inefficient. Like apartments.com, no one's really solved this problem.
So we were talking beforehand about kind of your origin story with Nooklyn. Since I was asking you, are you the founder? And you said, no, actually, I was a customer first. So this sounds like an interesting origin story. Walk us through kind of how you got involved with Nooklyn and ultimately became the CEO.
Sure. So I started out, I was building a fintech company. It's like, with hindsight, probably not the best idea, but basically it was a startup to help colleges with their finances. And I moved to New York City to get that thing going. But I realized very quickly that like selling to universities is not an easy task. Like most of them take 12 to 18 months to make a decision. And then even when you get yes, it's not really a yes, because there's like what I describe in higher ed as like committees of no, where there's like 17 people who can say no, but one person who can say yes. And if any one of those people say no, it's over. And so Nooklyn actually was the two. I met, Harley, who started the company, through Craigslist. And I moved into the same building that he lived in. So I was his neighbor, as well as where the office was. And I ran out of money very quickly because that startup was not planned out well. And at that point, I was just like, I texted Harley, I was like, hey, let's build this website. just as a way so I could like eat the next day. I remember at that point, like I had like $2 left. So I didn't have enough like to go to the subway to like go meet my aunt for some food or something. So I was like, let's see if this guy can get this going.
Wow. And gives us a sense of what was that next sort of step that made, I mean, build a website, but then like how did that start resonating, and how did you get the word out?
So I'm a firm believer in in the back end aspect of websites being just as good as the front end. So originally the first 6 months or maybe even the first year was just focused on building a good back end, because what happens in real estate is that the back end tools tend to be really clunky and no one uses them because they're just really hard and difficult to use. And so we really focused on the first year being just focused on making sure the agents used it for their own processes. And then the first outward facing feature was the roommate network. And honestly, the biggest way we got that started was that we printed I think it was 500,000 coasters and gave them for free to all the bars nearby. And so that basically got it going. That was our first set of users using the platform outside of the real estate agents.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because one thing you learn is that all the bars don't want just Budweiser, because people have opinions about beer and stuff like that, and that's who typically gives them the coasters. And so that really got us going, as a business from a user acquisition. And then honestly, it just grew organically. We've never had some huge marketing budget or anything like that.
Wow,
that's awesome.
So, yeah, I'm curious. What you think the biggest roadblocks are, right? So as you built the back end, obviously you're trying to get folks, using the tools. I mean, I would think there's some pretty deep traditions there, and especially in the New York market. Is it hard to get folks to switch the process they're familiar with and try something new?
So for us, we don't tend to hire people who are agents at some other brokerage for that reason. It's very hard to get them to shift, and we just tend to focus on people who are in hospitality, and so bartenders, just people who are very sociable, who people like social butterflies, so to speak. And then the roadblock is the ability to hire and train those people is a significant amount of work, but once you're there, that person understanding of real estate is through your system. So for us, we've tried not to hire and poach from other companies, because it just leads to a lot of misexpectations of what we're trying to build. And to give a kind of good example of that, it's the concept of pocket listings. So all throughout New York City, it's the model of, as an agent, you get a listing and you're the only one who can show it. But that's deeply inefficient, right? Because if someone wants to see it and they're nearby and you live in New Jersey, what are the odds that the person's going to see it? Zero. And so, at least at that day. And whereas at Nooklyn, there are no pocket listings. Any listing inside our network can be shown by any of our agents. And so it means that an renter will get a response very quickly to an agent saying, hey, this guaranteed money that you potentially have is now going away, but you have to, you'll make it up in volume, is a hard sell. To a bartender making $2,000 for renting an apartment, it's a huge upgrade. So it's been easier to go that way in terms of our growth. And the challenge is just hiring and training people, because it's a pretty time-consuming process.
Yeah. So let's talk about New York more specifically. We were talking a bit about this before we got on, but I think our listeners would be curious. With COVID, I think there's a perception out there that everybody who used to live in New York City fled for Connecticut and upstate, and, bought the big mansion and left New York behind. Is there any truth to that myth? Are things back to normal? How's New York feeling right now?
I think that was, so I lived in Manhattan, peak COVID, so to speak, April, May. I lived in Stuytown, which is a apartment complex with I think 11,000 apartments. And in my building, I think half of my floor was gone, and then throughout the building. So it was something where when I would count the empty apartments in the complex, it was probably 50%. So I think a lot of people left New York City who lived in Manhattan. And I think Brooklyn was probably half of that in terms of like peak vacancy. It was like maybe 25%, which is still greater than any other event, but still it wasn't nearly as bad as Manhattan. That said, this year we've had record, I think we're about on pace to rent 5,000 or so apartments. And so it's been the opposite for us this year, where people have not only moved back, we're now probably entering a period where there's like an inventory crunch. So if you start looking for like a Williamsburg 2-bedroom apartment, like you may not actually find something this winter, which was never true before. So it's like the summary of this is, it was the lowest of lows and the highest of highs, is where we're at now, where we're now entering a place where I think the occupancy is higher than it's ever been. But it was certainly quite a roller coaster along the way.
Any predictions for what that'll do to to actual rental rates? Whether the cost of renting is going to continue to increase?
I mean, at this point, no question, right? Because part of the issue is that there's just not enough housing for the amount of people who live here and who want to move here. And I think that like, if there's anything we saw, there was somewhat of an exodus out of like places like San Francisco and other areas. And, I think we're gonna, part of why New York City is where it is because like, I don't want to get political, but like some place like Texas will enact a law that's highly restrictive towards the rights of women, and women will tend to then, as a graduate, leave that state. And so you already have a trend where people, like smart, intelligent people, are leaving the middle of the country and going to the coastal cities. And I don't think San Francisco did a good job of like managing that growth. So we're in a place where there's just going to be an inventory crunch. Rents are now, if not at their peak, basically at their peak, and next year will be peak rents. And it's kind of a unforced error in the sense, like New York City could do a better job of building units, but it's just very difficult. So it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So to kind of close us out here, what excites you most about where Nooklyn is headed next? What's on your horizon? What's the product going to do for folks?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things, like in the short term, is lease signing. So in New York City, no one did digital lease signings really because the housing court wouldn't recognize a digitally signed lease. Now with COVID, that has changed. So we've been working on this for about a decade, and finally we can like take what we've been working towards, of digitizing that lease, which is the contract that's the product of Nooklyn essentially, and turning that whole end-to-end workflow. So that's the short term, is digitizing the lease signing process fully through Nooklyn for the majority of our listings. And then the longer term is applying it from market to market. So, we're currently based out of Brooklyn, Queens, and Bronx. And the next horizon is looking at other markets, especially, areas like LA or, Miami, where there's a lot of people moving back and forth from New York. And there's a demand that there's no product out there for them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, it seems like it's a problem that's not going away anytime soon, and that you're part of making it more streamlined and safer. So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on your journey, where you guys go next. So I mean, we really appreciate the time and getting to know you a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, boys.